All right. Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants event. My name is Joe Grabowski, and I'll be your host for today. I will be your host, and I will also be today's guest speaker, because today we're going to dive into a recent trip I was on in Tasmania, looking for some of Tasmania's incredible wildlife. Tasmania is one of the most rugged, remote places you can visit, and I hope I can share that with you today via some pictures, via some videos. We'll have a Kahoot quiz after my presentation, and then we're going to have lots of time for Q&A. So I'm not going to waste too much time, and I'm going to get right into the action. If you're tuning in via YouTube, use the chat sidebar to send in some questions at any time. Those classes who are with us as camera classrooms today, I will pick on you a little bit later, and we'll take some of your questions. So here we go. I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to get right into it. So I thought, first of all, for some students who might not know where Tasmania is, let's orient ourselves in the world. So Tasmania, here's a map of the world. And then if we look down here, we've got Australia in the bottom corner. If we get in a little bit closer, oops, let's see if that'll go now. There we go. We get a look at Australia. So you can see that Australia is divided up into different states and territories. And then down here, we have this little island of Tasmania. If we go a little bit further, we're going to get right in on Tasmania. So Tasmania, like I already mentioned, it's just a small island, but it is one of the best places to go in Australia to find Australian wildlife. It's still not a lot of people living on the island. There's still lots of wild areas that have been left untouched. It's very rugged. It's very remote. And I hope this presentation is going to highlight that for you. Now, before I go too far, I want to tell you why I was in Australia in the first place. Many of the classrooms joining might be following along with the Darwin 200 voyage, which is a 2-year voyage by tall ship following Charles Darwin's voyage of the Beagle. So for 2 years, we've been sailing around the world. We do a live event every week called The World's Most Exciting Classroom. And I've been lucky enough to catch up with the Oosterschelde, that's the name of the ship, several times. I was with the ship in the UK before it sailed. Then I caught up with it in Brazil, in Rio de Janeiro, again in Peru, then in the Galapagos. And then most recently, I caught up with the ship while it was in Sydney, Australia. So we had some big celebrations. We worked with different groups in the field with our young Darwin leaders. It was a lot of fun. But after that, I wanted to get down to Tasmania. Now, before I left the Sydney area, I did a few dives. Scuba diving is one of my favorite things to do in the world. And one of my favorite creatures in Australia is this leafy sea dragon. So leafy sea dragons are related to seahorses. They live in kelp, kind of along the edge of kelp, along kind of sandy, rocky areas. They have incredible camouflage. They're very difficult to find. So I was very happy over the course of 2 dives to be able to find 3 of them. And I was able to shoot some video and shoot some photos. If you want to learn a little bit more about weedy sea dragons, under our daily dive section, we have 2 videos. One video is talking about weedy sea dragons in general. And the second video is a live dive where we used our ROV to go looking for them while I was diving, which was pretty cool. And then one of my favorite things to do is to interact with the wildlife while diving. And so this blue grouper here, you're going to see in this video, their nickname is the Labrador of the Sea, because they're basically a big, curious puppy dog. And this blue grouper was very interested and was coming in front of my camera the entire dive. And eventually I figured out this is what it wanted. It wanted a nice scratch. So this fish can grow up to 1 meter and weigh over 50 kilograms when it's fully grown. But you can see that it's very curious and it wanted a scratch. So that's why it gets that name, like a little dog, a Labrador of the Sea. Pretty cool. All right, let's change gears and let's head to Tasmania. So first thing I did was rent a car. And I jumped in that car with my camera gear and I drove to a place called the Tasman Peninsula. That's in the lower southwest of the island. And it's a great spot for wildlife. And one of the best ways to see that wildlife is to jump in a Zodiac. So I went with an ocean group in a little Zodiac and we went out looking for wildlife. And the first thing we found were these beautiful black cormorants. So they're relatively rare, but in this pretty easy to find. And these cormorants, they hunt for fish. They're excellent divers and catching fish underwater. Little hook on their end of the beak to help them catch fish. And then those green eyes I think are just stunning. They have these beautiful green eyes that I tried to capture here in this photo. Along the rocks are New Zealand fur seals. So you can see a few of them lounging on the rocks. You can see two of them up there having a little bit of a disagreement. And then we're able to get a little bit closer, so you can get a closer look at this fur seal. Albatross are some of my favorite birds. Albatross are some of the biggest birds in the world. They're amazing birds because sometimes they only come to land once a year to mate. So the rest of the year, they're flying over the ocean. They might sit in the water for little breaks. They're looking for squid and little fish and things like that. But they come to shore once a year to mate and then raise a chick. And they mate for life. So they come back to the island where they're going to raise their young. They wait for their mate to arrive, and then they have a big greeting ceremony. Lots of calling and clacking of beaks, raising of wings. So they're, they don't see each other for a whole year. So they're pretty excited when they get back together. And their wingspans are huge. They can be up to 3-meter wingspan. They're heavy birds too. So you can imagine taking off from the water is super awkward, and they kind of have to take a running start. And they look very funny when they're trying to take off. They stretch out their wings like a plane to try and get some lift, and they run on the surface of the water to try and build enough speed that they can get up and fly. Now, what we were really hoping to see were humpback whales. Humpback whales in Australia, they migrate to colder waters to find food around Antarctica. There's tons of krill and small fish and things like that in those cold Antarctic waters. So they migrate down there to feed. And then at another part of the year, they migrate to the warm waters, northern Australia, to give birth to their calves and raise the calves there in nice, warm, calm waters, and then do the migration again, bring their calves down to the colder waters of Antarctica. Now, it was a little bit late in the season, but there were a group of whales that were sticking around. This piece of Tasmania is the last piece of land before open ocean, and then the next land that they'll see is Antarctica. But because there was food in the water, the whales don't usually feed when they migrate. But since there was an abundant amount of food off this part of Tasmania, they were sticking around and feeding. There were some males, there were some females, and then there were some calves that were there with their mothers. So I was able to get some really great photos of the whales. If you just sit in the zodiac and you're calm, the whales pretty much come to you. And so this is a mother and a calf. You can see they both got their tails up in the air. They were playing around. There's a look at some of that rugged landscape on the edge of Tasmania, and a whale there taking a breath. You can see its blowhole and its fin. They are curious. So this one's it's called spy hopping, when they kind of poke their head out of the water to try and get a better look at what's going on. They wave to you. Look at those. That's how you can definitely tell a humpback whales. They have these massive long pectoral fins, and sometimes they stick them out of the water and give them a wave. And then I got this video of a calf very close to our boat, just playing around, having a good time. So you can see it's rolling over, it's spanking its fin on the water, its tail's coming up and down. So this calf is going along the side of our rubber boat, of our Zodiac, totally relaxed. Its mom's probably down there somewhere close by. So this calf was just having a little play, and it's within the next few days would have been embarking on a long journey all the way to Antarctica, to those nutrient-rich waters where they're going to find lots of food before they come back and migrate back to Australia. So that's just a little look at that baby humpback whale having a little bit of fun, a little bit of a play near the Zodiac. And if you watch for a moment longer, I think you'll see Mum pop up. You'll see a bigger fin come up and take a breath. There's the two fins, Mum and the baby. Very, very cool. Now that night, there was something I really wanted to see there. I had to go down to the beach after dark and wait for about an hour. It was cold, it was rainy, and I couldn't use a light because I didn't want to scare away what I was waiting for. What I was waiting for is these guys. They're sometimes called little penguins, sometimes called blue penguins, sometimes called fairy penguins. They're the smallest penguins in the world. They live in Australia, and they come back at night. They hunt all day in the water, and then they wait until night to come to shore because they don't want to be seen by predators. So that's why they wait till it's after dark. And you see here, I'm using a red light. And I use that red light for two reasons. One, it doesn't really hurt the eyes of the penguin, which is important. It doesn't wreck their night vision. And they just seem to be a little bit calmer in the red light. You can see these ones are curious and they're looking. Had I been using a really bright light, it would have really bothered their eyes and they probably wouldn't have stuck around. They probably would have went into the bush and disappeared really quickly. So the smallest penguins in the world are these little blue penguins. They can be found in New Zealand as well. And yeah, had to wait on the beach in the dark, in the cold, but it was worth it because they came back from hunting for fish, and I was able to see some of them. So the next morning, I was on a mission to get somewhere called Maria Island. So they call it Maria Island if you're using an Aussie accent, Maria Island if we were referring to it here. And it's a little island off the coast. You have to take a ferry to get to it. No cars, no stores. If you're coming over there, you camp. So you bring a tent with you so you can camp on the island. And this island is a wildlife sanctuary. So there's all kinds of hiking trails. And it's a beautiful island. And it's full of Tasmanian devils and wombats and kangaroos and patamelons, and the list goes on and on and on. So I was getting in my car to drive to the ferry, and this little fairy wren was sitting on the mirror, the rear view or the side view mirror of my car. So I got a nice picture of it on the side view. Then after I set my tent up on the island, there was these little patymelons. This is a mother with its baby. The baby's hanging out of the pouch. And you can see the baby is getting cleaned, but the baby's not super excited about being cleaned. He's kind of saying, Mom, enough, knock it off. Okay, I get it. Yeah, knock it off, Mom. But the mom is determined to get the baby nice and clean. So marsupials, most mammals in Australia are marsupials, which means they have a pouch. So the young are born really small and underdeveloped. They crawl into the pouch. They find the milk in there, and then they grow and develop in the pouch. And then they come out as they get bigger, but they can still go back in for safety if there's predators around. So this baby patamelon didn't really appreciate the cleaning it was getting, and so it eventually escaped from the pouch. And so these are endemic to Australia, or to Tasmania, actually, this species. Endemic means they're only found in a certain part of the world. And so these ones are endemic. They're only found on Tasmania. If a species is found all over the world, we call them a pandemic species. Wombats. Maria Island is famous for wombats. Wombats are so cool. Normally, they only come out at night. They're nocturnal. But because there's no predators on the island, and people generally leave them alone except to take pictures, they do come out during the day, which means you can get some really cool pictures of wombats during the day. They're burrowers, so they like to dig holes. They eat grass and other plants. They're really good diggers. And another little fun fact about wombats is when they poop, it's shaped in little cubes. So you know a wombat was around because their poop is stacked up almost like a little building after they go to the bathroom, because it comes out in little cube shapes, like little blocks. So cool to see the babies. So there's a genetic mutation. Some wombats have this blonde colored hair. And most you see have this gray one. So this is a mother that has that mutation for that blonde colored hair. And then the baby's got the gray hair, which is more common that you see in wombats. I've got a little video clip of two of them having a little munch together. So you can see they're quite round little critters. They look like a small fuzzy little bear, but they are a marsupial. They have a pouch, but their pouch faces backwards. And the reason their pouch faces backwards is because if the mother's digging, she doesn't want to fill her pouch with dirt with the baby inside. So their pouch faces backwards so that the baby doesn't get covered in dirt when the mother digs. On my camera bag, I left on the ground while I was taking some pictures of some geese. There's a species of geese or goose that's only found in Tasmania. So I was taking some pictures, and I turned around and saw this mother and baby wombat investigating my camera bag. So they're having a little rub along the side of my camera bag. They thought that was pretty interesting. So that was kind of cool. So there's the baby coming out from behind the camera bag, just rubbing its face on the strap. And one more picture there as the sun was going down of another wombat out on one of the trails on the island. This is a great place to find Forster's kangaroos. So Forster's kangaroos are big kangaroos. They're not the biggest. The biggest are the red kangaroos. You find them on the mainland. But these guys can still get to be pretty big. They can be pretty close to probably as tall as like a 6 foot tall man if they're standing up tall on their legs. During the day, they kind of hide out in the bushes. They rest in the shade when it's really warm. But then as the sun starts to go down, they come out to look for food. And so again, they love things like grass and other little plants and shrubs. So they come out as the sun's setting, and they'll spend most of the night grazing and looking for food to eat. And you can see, again, like I said, there's no predators on the island. So they are super relaxed. You can see this big male here, just relaxed by the ocean, soaking up a little bit of that sun, having a good scratch, not a care in the world, living on Maria Island. And what's great too is that you don't have to worry about, getting good pictures, because the animals don't run away. They stay pretty close. They're used to people hiking on the island, so they're not really that worried about people. There's another picture of our friend having a nice lounge there. This is a different species. These aren't kangaroos. These are wallabies. So wallabies are essentially kind of a smaller, rounder, squat marsupial. They do look very much like kangaroos, but they are a different species. This is a mother, and that's her joey. Most young marsupials are called joeys in Australia. This one was probably too big to get back in the pouch. So this one's probably pretty close to saying goodbye to mom and moving on to a life on its own, but curious and posing for a nice picture. And then, of course, there's birds. So along the shoreline, there was this great pair of sooty oyster catchers. And so they walk along as a pair. They've got those nice long beaks. They stick them into the sand. They're looking for little crustaceans, little mollusks, other tasty things that they might find in the sand. So the next day, I was heading to a place called the Tarkine Rainforest. The Tarkine is a beautiful chunk of land. It is in the northeast of the island. It's about 1 million acres of rainforest. So it's about 1 million acres of green, rivers, wild wilderness, mostly untouched. There's a little bit of mining in some spots, a tiny bit of logging, but for the most part, it is a beautiful 1 million acres of untouched rainforest. And so on my way there, I made a few stops. One of the stops was just on the side of the road when I came across an echidna. So echidnas are super cool. They kind of look like a little porcupine. They kind of look like a little hedgehog, but they are marsupial. They're a mammal. You can see that this one is looking for insects. So they've got a big long tongue, little snout that they poke into different spots looking for insects. If a predator came, they can burrow really quickly to protect their underside, and then that little ball of spikes is sticking up. So no predator is going to be overly eager to try and take a bite out of that echidna. And echidnas are monotremes. Monotremes are a type of mammal. There's only 2 of them. The echidna is one, and the platypus is the other one. They're only found in Australia, so they're endemic to Australia. And they're the only mammals that lay eggs, which I think is super cool. Every other mammal has live birth, except the echidna and the platypus. That's why they call them a primitive mammal, because they lay eggs instead of giving live birth. So that's the echidna. And then if we're talking about monotremes, we should talk about the platypus. So the platypus is the weirdest Aussie animal you could come across. It's got fur. It's got a tail like a beaver. It has a beak like a duck. It has a poison barb on its back foot, the males. It has webbed feet like a duck. and it dives down into the rivers. They keep their eyes closed, and they have electroreceptors all along their bill that help them detect nerve impulses in insects under rocks and underwater. So they dive down with their eyes closed, fish around with their bill, and they're finding insects and other tasty things to eat below the water. They're super hard to find. This one here, I sat by a river in a place called Loongana for quite a while in the evening before this one appeared, because they normally come out in the evening. And then I was at an arboretum as well, where they have a hide where you can wait in a camera hide for the platypus. And this one came up nice and close to the hide. So you can get a nice look at this platypus. You can see that bill. You can see that beaver tail. Really, really cool. And then a little video clip of one just sitting on the top of the water. They don't do this for long. If they come up to the top, it's usually just for a few seconds, have a breath, have a look around, and then they go back under to look for more food. Okay, so that's our monotremes, two coolest animals in Australia, I think, the platypus and the echidna. So I made it to the Tarkine, beautiful, beautiful rainforest, very green, lots of ferns, big, tall, towering trees. Now, the thing about this spot is it rains a lot, which is a good thing because there's lots of moisture and lots of water. But the 2 days before I arrived, they had over 100 millimeters of rain, which is a lot of rain for this part of the world. So I was driving just a little compact car. I didn't have a 4x4. So the roads are all dirt, and they go for hours. There's only one road in and one road out. So it was a very challenging experience to get into where I was going, into the Tarkine. But eventually I did make it. And you can see, so I'm flying a drone here. I have it sped up a little bit so you can see. This is kind of what it looks like. This is one of the rivers, is the Piedmont River, where I spent a night in a little village. So it's a couple of shacks. It used to be a little mining town, a couple little buildings and a pub. And so those buildings have been turned into cabins when the mining stopped. So you can see beautiful rainforest. You can see all the moisture in the form of clouds coming up from the leaves, coming up from the trees. Dark, dirty water. The river was really, really high because of all the rain that had come over the last few days. So this is a little look at what it's like in the Tarkine. This is a little boat that you can go up the river in, and then you can see this this old mining village. So you can see that's the pub building right there, and then there's a couple cabins sprinkled in this little area. But then as far as you can see after that is just rainforest. So super challenging to get to, especially in a little compact car. The clouds were nice and low, so you kind of have a cool view going up through the clouds. Yeah, it was a very unsettled day. So you can see kind of a little bit of dark clouds, a little bit of sky peeking through. So here's just a little look at this very cool environment, this rainforest environment, the Tarkine Rainforest. There's the river down there stretching off. All that mist, all that evaporation coming up from the trees as well. Really, really cool. So a couple shots of the river. Again, you can see it's very high. There's lots of logs drifting down the river. Lots of mist coming off of the river, which made it kind of a cool spot to explore. And the next day I had to leave the Tarkine. And here was the problem, was the way I came in, the bridge washed out that night. So there was no bridge to get out the way I came in. Luckily, they have this little barge. This barge goes back and forth on a wire, a steel cable in the river, and it can hold 2 cars. So first thing in the morning, I drove my car onto the barge, and it took me to the other side. It was about a 3-hour detour to get back out and back the way that I wanted to be going, but it was worth it to be able to spend somewhere so remote and wild and rugged in Tasmania. So that is what I wanted to share for today. I hope you enjoyed some of those pictures and stories and video clips. I'm going to come back from that screen share, and I have a quick Kahoot quiz that I set up in the background. So give me 2 seconds to load it up here, and then we're going to devote the rest of the time to some Q&A action. So you should see a screen share relaunching shortly. That's the one. There we go. And I'm going to hit start. So today you want to go to kahoot.it, kahoot.it, and it's going to ask you for a PIN number. You want 91842. Number 919. Now, lots of ways you can join. If you have a tablet or a Chromebook at your seat, awesome, you can join that way. If not, maybe your teacher can pop it up at the front of the room. You can shout out your answers to him or her. Or if you can't get in with technology, don't worry about it. Just play along and see how you do. But I see students joining us, which is great. If you're tuning in via YouTube, don't be shy. Use the chat sidebar to send in some questions, and we will answer some of those. So 4 questions today, true and false, multiple choice. The faster you get the right answer in, the more points you're going to get. And then from there, we'll move on to Q&A for the rest of our time together. I do hope you guys get to visit Australia someday. It is an awesome country. Rainforest, coral reef, desert, and everything in between. And then Tasmania, that's one of my favorite spots. Tasmania is very green, very wild, good diving in the ocean, just a great place to be and spend some time. So it looks like things have slowed down with the classrooms joining. So I think that we can get this Kahoot started in a couple seconds. It is going to count us in. You'll get a 3-second countdown, and then we will be live with the Kahoot. So here we go. All right, true or false coming your way. Humpback whales migrate to colder waters to give birth. So we talked about that right at the beginning. Is that true or is that false? That the humpback whales, they migrate to colder waters to give birth to their calves. You have 7 more seconds to lock in your answer, and then we'll see how we did. All right. Ooh, we fooled a lot of students there, but the answer is false. They go to the warmer waters in the north because that's a nice, warm, safe, calm spots for their young. Then they head down to the colder waters, and that's where they're doing their feeding. They're looking for krill, especially in those nutrient-rich waters. The waters are way rougher and more dangerous. So they have the calves in the nice, calmer water to give them a chance to grow and, yeah, give them the best chance before they head to those colder waters. All right. The Wonder Giraffe is holding down the lead. We have another true or false coming your way. A wombat's pouch faces backwards. Is that true or is that false? We know marsupials have a pouch. Kangaroos and wombats and even Tasmanian devils. All marsupials have that pouch where their young grows, where their young can go for safety. But does a wombat's face backwards? All right, that's 100% true. It faces backwards so that when it's digging, it doesn't fill its pouch with dirt. Red raccoon, snagging top spot. We have a multiple choice coming your way. You need to select 2 answers here. So pick the 2 best answers. Which 2 mammals are monotremes? Echidnas, kangaroos, platypus, or wombats? 2 answers here. You have to click them both to get the points. Which 2 mammals are monotremes? Echidnas, kangaroos, platypus, or wombats? You've got about 10 seconds to lock in your final answer. There is a clue that just decoded that should help you as well. All right. Good job, crew. It is the echidna and the platypus. They are monotremes. They are the only mammals that lay eggs. Really, really cool. Wonder Giraffe back in the lead, and we have one more question coming your way about how many acres of rainforest make up the Tarkine. Was it 5,000, 100,000, 600,000, or 1,000,000 acres of rainforest? So about how many acres of rainforest make up the Tarkine? 5,000, 100,000, 600,000, or as high as 1,000,000? A couple more seconds. All right. Good job, crew. Most went with 1,000,000 acres. So let's take a look at our leaderboard. On our podium in third place, we've got the Wonder Giraffe. In second place, the Red Raccoon. That means we have a new leader sneaking in at the last minute. The Winged Gazelle. There we go. Gazelles are fast, so I imagine a winged one is even faster. Very, very cool. All right, so let's come back from that screen share. Thanks for playing along, and let's get into some Tasmania Q&A action. Oops, my camera turned off. We can fix that. Okay, so if you're tuning in via YouTube, don't be shy. Use the chat sidebar. Miss Curtis's 5th grade class is backstage with me, but their camera isn't connected. So if you want to send questions via the private chat, we'll grab some there. But for now, let's start with Mr. Steltman's 4th and 5th graders. How are we doing today?
Good. How are you?
Good. Thanks for coming in today.
Thank you. Samira is going to come ask a question. So do you have to teach anymore, Joe, or are you done teaching completely?
I've been out since 2017. Yeah, doing this full time.
Nice. Sorry, Samira, go for it. Come on in.
Are Tasmanian devils in Australia?
Tasmanian devils are 100% in Australia. Give me 1 second here. I might have a picture handy. I'm just trying to remember where I tucked them. So just to tell you a little bit about Tasmanian devils, for those who maybe don't know them, they do not look like what you see in the cartoon, Looney Tunes. They're marsupial. They're blackened with a little bit of white. They're carnivores, but mostly they look for things that have already died. So roadkill, animals that die on their own. So they're really kind of more like scavengers, decomposers, breaking stuff down. They make the loudest, weirdest noises you'll ever hear when they're angry, when they're fighting. They fight a lot. They don't always get along. And I was lucky enough, last time I was in Australia, it was way back in 2007. I lived there for a year. And I went to Tasmania. I did a drive around Tasmania that time as well. And I stayed at a tiny little cabin where the person who owned the cabin put roadkill on the porch that night. And all night long, there were Tasmanian devils eating on the porch, which was pretty cool. And I found a picture from that time. I did see a Tasmanian devil this time on the Tasman Peninsula, but it was at night and I was driving. So I was lucky I didn't hit it because it came running right out in front of the car. But I was able to hit the brakes. So I didn't get a picture, obviously, because it just ran across the road. But I do have a picture here. So you can see this is what a Tasmanian devil looks like. Yeah. And so you can see the meat on the porch. They're very, very cool. That one there, if you look closely, it's missing its right front leg.
Next.
Because
you when they call next.
They fight like crazy and they bite each other's feet off sometimes, which is pretty crazy. So there we go. That is a Tasmanian devil.
Good question, Samira.
All right, who's got another question? I'll take another one before we jump to some more.
Hannah, do you want to do your question? Let's go. We're just going to go in order, just like we do. All right, Hannah. Make sure
There'll be more time. I'll come back.
What was your favorite animal you saw there?
Favorite animal there? I've got to go with the platypus. I think they're so cool. Last time I was there, way back in 2007, I saw one for about 10 seconds. I just happened to look down into a river. I was pretty high up because it was kind of rocks going up, and it just saw it for like 10 seconds and it disappeared. No pictures, no video. So this time, to be able to see them a few times, get some pictures, get some video, that was pretty cool. But yeah, platypus for sure. That was my favorite. All right, I'm going to come back your way shortly. Miss Colburn's crew, do you have any questions?
We do, and Zed in our class, our remote class, is going to ask them. Zed, put your mic on, ask your questions.
Okay, so my first question is that we're moving into financial literacy. What is the most significant cost to travel as a tourist or explorer?
What is the most significant cost? Well, the most expensive is for Australia is getting there. Depending on your flight, if you're lucky, you can get a flight for maybe $1,500. If you wait too long, then it could be $3,000 or more. So it is expensive to fly to Australia. I think that's the biggest expense. But I think the best way once you're there to save a little bit of money is to rent a car and to drive to some of the places you want to go and visit. That's how I did Tasmania. And then I stayed in Airbnbs, which are usually much cheaper than hotels, and usually in cooler spots. Sometimes you can find them in really remote areas, which is really fun. But yeah, it's just the nature of Australia. Now, the Canadian dollar is a little bit better. It's about 10 cents, worth about 10 cents more right now than the Australian dollar. So the exchange is a little bit more favorable for us. But yeah, flying there is definitely the biggest expense. And then I know from experience, renting when you live there is very, very expensive. But that was a long time ago. Okay, is there another question?
Yes. And my second question is that you have collected a lot of data. Who will you be sharing with besides us that are lucky?
Let's see. Well, part of what we've collected, the pictures, the videos, will become part of the legacy of the Darwin 200. So we've created a ton of educational videos. All of our live events are recorded and available for classrooms. So that's really important. The photos, for the most part, are for me. That last time in Tasmania was to get some footage and material to make those education videos, but it was also just something I love to do, is to be out and in the wilderness and taking pictures of wildlife. So the photos are for me, but they're all going to be shared as well. They're shared on my website. They're shared in our educational videos. So that's going to be the legacy, I think, of most of the footage and the pictures collected is education.
Thanks, Joe.
All right. So I can see a question in the chat from Miss Curtis's crew, and they're wondering, where does it like to live in the water, the platypus? So they're definitely not saltwater creatures. They like fresh water, and they love rivers. So rivers, calmer rivers and streams. If they're too turbulent, too much, chop and churn, then they don't like that as much. If they're too much rapids, they like nice, calmer waters. It's easier for them to hunt and look for food. But then you can find them sometimes in lakes and little ponds as well. But for the most part, they really like those rivers and streams. They like those a lot. Let's see, YouTube. Oh, yeah, we do have YouTube questions. Miss Dillon, if you can just clarify the question about the tree on Maria Island. There's tons of trees on Maria Island. It's very heavily forested. There are open areas. There used to be an airstrip where planes could land. Now it's just full of grass. That's where the kangaroos like to come out at night. Oh, why was the tree red? Interesting. I'll have to go back and look at that picture. I'm not remembering that tree, but I'll go back and take a look at it in a second while I grab a couple more questions here. What does the name Tasmania? Oh, what? Yeah, so Tasmanian devil, I think that they get their name because of the sound they make. I wish I had a recording for you. Maybe you can find one online. When they're angry, they make a terrifying screeching sound, and sometimes it can go on for a long time. So imagine you're one of the first settlers exploring a place like Tasmania, and you hear those shrieks and screams at night. I can only imagine what they thought they were. So I think that's where that devil name comes from. Do echidnas have spines? Absolutely. We could see them sticking out of the fur. They're not like a porcupine quill, which if you touch will stick right into your skin. It's more of a deterrent. If you were trying to bite it or put your teeth on it, you wouldn't be able to get a grip on it, and it would hurt, but it wouldn't leave, quills behind, like if a dog tries to get a porcupine. Would a platypus survive in America? I don't think so. Maybe somewhere like California or Florida, where the weather stays warmer. They definitely couldn't survive a winter in Canada or the US. It would really just depend on, is there food that they can find in the water? So possibly, but they're definitely better suited for that time in Australia. And the red tree, I think you're talking about the photos at night. That's because I used a red light, so I wouldn't hurt the penguin's eyes. So in the daytime, that tree's brown with green leaves, but at night, everything looks red with the headlamp that I was using, so I wouldn't disturb the animals. All right, let's swing back, and we'll see if Mr. Seltman's crew has a few more questions for us.
Yeah, I think there's two. Dixie,
Perfect.
go first, and then Nora.
How many species of kangaroos are there?
Of kangaroos? Ooh, that's a really good question. Off the top of my head, I can think of at least 3. There's the gray kangaroos, there's the Forsters, there's the red kangaroos, but I bet you I'm missing some. So let me take a quick look at our friend Google. I can think of 3 off the top of my head, but it looks like I missed. So there's eastern gray kangaroos and there's western gray kangaroos as well. So it looks like there's, what I'm seeing here is that there's 4 species. So the western, the eastern, the red. Yeah. Oh, there's one called an antilopine kangaroo. I've never heard of that before. So those are the species of kangaroos.
Okay.
Very cool.
Nora?
We do that.
Do Tasmanian devils' legs grow back?
No, they're not like, there are like some species of lizards that can grow back body parts like a tail. I think like the axolotls might be able to regenerate a limb, but no, mammals, we can't do that, unfortunately. So that Tasmanian devil is going to be walking around funny for the rest of its life. But it was doing okay. It looked healthy. And so, yeah, it made do with its injury. All right. Great questions, crew. Miss Coburn's crew, do you have any follow-ups?
Yes, we have a question from Alexis.
Okay, so the question that we have is, does Tasmania have the oldest trees in the world?
Okay, that's a good question. So it depends on where you are. So Australia has some of the biggest trees in the world. When we think of the biggest trees, we always think about the red, what are they called? The General Sherman is one of them. The red oaks, the big red, blanking on the name for them, but they're down in California, and those are massive, huge trees. The sequoias, that's what I was looking for. And in Tasmania, they have some of the tallest trees as well. We just don't hear about it much. One of our Darwin leaders, I might have a little video clip. Maybe I can, if I can find it really quickly, I want to share it with you. Give me 1 second. So one of our Darwin leaders, their project was to climb these trees because conservationists are climbing these trees. They're measuring them, and that helps them figure out how big they are, how much volume they are, and that helps them determine how old they are. That helps them determine that these, in fact, really are some of the biggest trees in the world. So where's my video? I think
we might have watched that one. They built a bridge. Was there a bridge or something?
No.
No, is that a different one?
You might be thinking of OSA Conservation. They build the bridges through the trees. But I did find the video. So I'm going to play that for you quickly so you can see what it's like climbing some of the tallest trees in the world. I just have to drag it to my desktop. All right. Let's take a look at that video. There it is. All right. Australia also is home to some of the oldest trees in the world. One really cool, well, there's lots of cool examples. Up in the rainforest, in the Daintree, there are species of cicadas that date back to the time of dinosaurs. Now, the trees aren't actually that old, but the species dates back that long, which is pretty cool. There's another species called the Wollemi pine, which everybody thought was extinct since the time of the dinosaurs. But then they found a little small grove of them growing in a super remote place called the Blue Mountains in New South Wales. And so these are basically back from the dead, these Wollemi pines. Their secret is their location's a complete secret because they don't want people going there and putting them in jeopardy. So that's pretty cool. But then there's Huron pines in Tasmania's remote area. There's a stand of them that are over 1,000 years old, some of them up to 3,000 years old. So they're definitely some of the oldest and rarest species of trees in the world. So that's a great question.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. Anything else from your crew before we check another one?
Yep, we're good to go.
Okay, perfect. I've got a couple questions online to wrap up. Miss Curtis's crew was wondering, how big is the animal population in Tasmania? Whew, that's impossible to answer, but it's big. Anywhere you go in Tasmania, you see something, whether it's falcons, kangaroos, wallabies, wombats, tons of different birds. That's an impossible question to answer. How big is the animal population in Tasmania? But the good news is it's really, really big because it is a smaller human population and a lot of wilderness left. And if nature has space, then nature does really, really well. Another question, the most dangerous in Tasmania, nothing that I would overly call dangerous. When I was in New South Wales, I did come across a red-bellied snake. They're really venomous. One of the top venomous snakes in Australia. Australia is famous for venomous spiders, some of the top venomous snakes on the planet. There's even species of sea snakes that are highly venomous. But on this particular trip, I just came across the red-bellied black snake. On Maria Island, there's tiger snakes, and the ranger did warn about a certain area just to be careful when it's in the middle of the day when it's really hot. But I didn't see any tiger snakes, which would have been kind of cool to see one, I think. Okay, last couple of questions here from online. Many deadly creatures in Tasmania. A couple, like the tiger snake, you know, if you were bit by one and you didn't get treated, you'd be in pretty big trouble. I guess, you know, there'll be sharks, like great white sharks in the water, but for the most part, sharks don't want anything to do with people. It's very, very rare that anyone encounters a shark. Can I show the patamelon? Okay, I'll show the patamelon one more time. Give me 2 seconds here to share my screen. Make sure I open that file. The patamelons are really cool. They're really cute. So I think we can go to the patamelon one more time. I don't see the harm in that. I just have to move it back to my second screen. There we go. And I'll share one more time. There. Perfect. Let's go full screen. Oops. That's not the button I wanted. Let's try that one more time. Okay. Hopefully that's full screen for you. I can't really tell once I've shared my screen, but if someone unmutes for me and lets me know if it's not full screen, I can do a quick switch. But odds are it's full screen because I don't hear anybody. Okay, here's our patamelon. Super cute. You can see this is the mother and the baby. They're endemic to Tasmania, this species of patamelon. And the baby here definitely wants to get loose. Doesn't want that cleaning that it's getting. Actually, if you look in the top corner, there's another one popping in. Looks like a young one. Just hopping by in the background. And then the baby gets out of the pouch and it's about to make its little escape. So hopefully that played okay. One more time for you. Very, very cool. What are sea snakes? That's a great question. It's basically a snake, but it lives in the ocean. It hunts fish in the ocean. It still has to come to the surface to breathe. It has to come to land to lay eggs in the sand. But it's basically a snake that lives in the ocean, and it's very, very venomous. So it bites its prey, injects a lot of venom, and then swallows it whole, a fish or an eel, whatever it catches, just like something would on land. I didn't see cane toads this time. I wasn't far enough north. Cane toads are an invasive species of toad. They were brought to Australia on purpose to try and eradicate beetles that were eating sugarcane. But anytime you bring something to a new country is generally a bad idea. And instead of eating the beetles, the cane toad started to eat native frogs, small snakes, lizards, other insects, reproduce like crazy. So there's billions of them all over Queensland. They're probably getting into New South Wales and the Northern Territories. There's so many of them that conservationists are trying to eliminate, eradicate them, but there's just too many of them. They lay tons of eggs, give birth to tons of young. Once something gets into somewhere it doesn't belong, it's really, really hard to get rid of it. And then it really, really impacts the native ecosystem. And then I have pictures. I don't have one handy, but with my hand next to a cane toad that was bigger than my hand. So they get really, really big. And other creatures can't eat them because they have poison, toxins in their skin. And if something like a dingo or a hawk eats one, they can die afterwards. So yeah, cane toads are not great to bring in. Did I see both species of wombats? I don't think I did. I think I just saw the longer-haired ones when I was in Tasmania. And then which animals are endemic to just Tasmania? So the Tasmanian devils were endemic to just Tasmania. That species of patamelon that I showed you was endemic to just Tasmania. Some of the other ones, like the little penguin, the Forster's kangaroo, which on the mainland are called eastern kangaroos, gray kangaroos, they're more endemic to the Australian area. But the patamelon, is a really good example of something that's endemic just to that area in Tasmania, and the Tasmanian devils, of course. Okay, I think that about wraps up our questions from the chat. What did it feel like petting the blue grouper? Fish secrete like a mucus on their skin, so it was very smooth underwater petting the blue grouper. It was very, I don't want to say slimy, but it was very smooth running your hand along the blue grouper. It was very, very cool to have the fish come up looking for a pet like that. All right. Well, a huge shout out to our camera classrooms. Thanks so much for hanging out today. I hope you learned a little bit about Tasmania and are eager to explore it yourself. Thanks to our classes on YouTube. You sent in some great questions. Thanks to everybody who played Kahoot today. But for now, I think there's nothing left to do but sign off for today. And hopefully we see you in some more Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants events later this month and into February. Thanks, everyone.